So, thank you for joining me from Edinburgh, is it?
It is, yeah, Edinburgh,
Yeah.
Scotland.
I know we were catching up before, but how's your day been up until now?
Yeah, we were catching up before. I was just saying how it's been a bit of a tough one, given the topic of the chat as well. So yeah, in one day we've had 3 months' notice of moving out of our flat. A client gave a month's notice, and then there's been a personal sort of bereavement in the wider family. So it's just one of these tougher days. But was also I was saying to you how it's important to how you react to these kind of days, and that all feeds into how we look at mental health and our reaction to these bad days and things that happen.
And not a lot of time to process it. Like it's only five, so
Yeah, yeah, I found out all of this stuff in the last 3 hours basically as well. So you've got like fresh emotions, I guess. Or
raw emotions.
But it's all good. I mean, I can get into like sort of my mentality on these things, but I definitely have a positive outlook on life in general.
Mm,
So it's it's okay.
mm. And thanks for still coming today,
Yeah, it's all
because
good.
it's so tempting to cancel things after a busy day.
Yeah, it is, but I think it's important to have these kind of conversations. So it's kind of a good representation of real life in that you can easily not have conversations about these topics because of the things that happen in your day to day. So I wasn't going to cancel it just because of having a bad day. If anything, I might feel better for having this
Yeah,
conversation, which is how I tend to look at these things.
yeah, no pressure. But yeah, the first question I wanted to hear your thoughts about like language that people use to describe mental health, well-being. I guess what is your own definition that you find helpful when thinking about your own mental well-being or mental health?
Hmm. It's a good question that because I'd say using it's almost like when you use the word mental before whatever word follows, it has sort of negative connotations to it. Um,
Especially without
so
the health bit.
yeah, exactly, yeah. You almost end up wanting to you always completely rephrase it away from the word mental. So if you were asking a friend or a family member, you'd say, "Oh, how are you doing?" Or you wouldn't phrase it as how's your mental health today? Like it feels like such an odd way to describe it and talk about it. So um, for me, it's checking in and asking, how someone is doing, or how their day is going, which in essence is, I think I do avoid using the term mental. I think that's the
Mm,
main takeout really here. I just more like be a bit more like human about it, I guess. And that for me would be avoiding using the word like "how's your mental health doing" or the
yeah.
phrase. Yeah, I think that might have answered the question, but I think it's talking about it as a general topic. I think it's okay to describe it as mental health or mental well-being because it is a good blanket way of putting it. But I think it's a lot more nuanced and personal if you're talking to someone on a one-to-one basis
Mm,
about how they're doing. I think you just tend to be a bit more human about it as opposed to using mental health or mental well-being as a blanket topic term.
yeah, for sure. It's probably making me think that's why the NHS use that because it's just a blanket. It's like an umbrella term to then address lots of things and get people to think about it more, whatever it means to them. Do you feel like the way that you approach your own health or well-being has changed over time? It's a big question, I
Definitely.
know.
Yeah. Well, definitely. I think one of the reasons you've asked me to be on this podcast because I'm always happy and I'm a bit of an open book is that around 10 years ago in my early 20s, I went through let's call it that mental health crisis in my own personal life. So I have experience in my own life of going through psychosis, and at the time I was sectioned into a psychiatric ward. I'm very open about talking about that, so it's
Mhm.
fine. You can ask any questions on that if you like. But because I went through that experience, that allows me to have a very personal, unique perspective on my own mental health. And ultimately, that comes down to looking after myself.
Hmm.
To be more specific, that is when it comes to, daily, working tasks. To give an example, it's important that if I'm feeling overwhelmed, to take breaks and walk away and make a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Or even one step further, take an entire hour or entire couple of hours away, and go for a walk and get in the fresh air. So exercise and fresh air are two things that I've definitely developed in my life in the last couple of years, which has
Mm.
really allowed me to feel at ease with my own mental health. Um,
And you're
Also,
self-employed. Sorry, to interrupt. You're self-employed as well, right? So is it even harder or more important to create that structure for yourself?
yeah, definitely. So it's interesting you use the word structure because in a way, when you're self-employed, and I work on a computer every day, you you try and create a structure, but by being self-employed, you find it quite difficult to have a structure. But that actually works as quite a positive thing because it means that, as long as you're fulfilling your work responsibilities, you have that flexibility to be able to, when I say take a break for a couple of hours and go for a walk, I'm very privileged to be able to do that because of the position I'm in. So I actually try to not have a structure when it comes to work. It's actually fulfill my duties for the clients that I have. But beyond that, try and take the time out of my day and my life to actually go out and have those walks. And everything I've said this for the past couple of years as well is everything should align to my own happiness. And if
Hmm.
something isn't making me happy, let's talk work specifically. Um, and if that's, say, something stressing me out, it's either trying to react to that, maybe not work with that client, or in the moment, just don't make any rash decisions and go for that walk or whatever it may
Mm.
be to help my mind feel a bit clearer.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's an interesting question and point.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you say happiness as well, because I imagine that there are times where you just don't feel happy, but maybe that's okay. And maybe there are other emotions which are more important at that time. Like, I don't know, like learning to cope with the stress or learning to cope with feeling down. And it might not be happy, but it's sort of um, building resilience in some way. Hard to always align with our happiness the whole time.
Yeah, for sure. I think you can't live life 100% happy because it doesn't really work like that. Like we're humans with emotions. But I would say that the moments that you aren't feeling in happy, it's just to step away for a moment and
Mm-hmm.
try and not instantly react in the emotions of how you're feeling in that moment. And if you have, someone close to you, whether that be a partner or a friend or a housemate or a parent, is just speak to them about it in that moment. And what I'm now finding is if you have a relationship where you can just air out how you're feeling and they are aware that they don't need to respond, they just need to listen.
Mm.
That's a new thing I think I've discovered as well. Um,
And has
so
that
it's not,
changed as well? Like your communication with other people?
yeah, definitely. I think you'll have the closer people in your life that you probably are more open, to chatting to about everything or in more detail. And I think if you have defined the way that you have those conversations, in a way that it's okay just to, rant for 5 minutes or tell them you're having a rubbish time. Um, Although that doesn't, you wouldn't associate that with the word happiness or happy. That is actually a step you need to do to regain some level of happiness
Mm.
post that. And I think if
That's
you don't
true.
have that outlet, then it can dwell with you for a while. So it's
Yeah.
important to have whatever that outlet is with other people. Even every I like to think of it as every hour in every day is a little bit of a mini journey within the big journey.
Mm.
So like if you can create like a logical and rational process. I'm quite a process and logical person, I think, as well. So
Mhm.
it's probably easier maybe for me than others and go, well, you create a process. If you're having that bad moment, then you know that you can go through a certain type of conversational style of interaction, and
Hmm.
then through history and your own experience that works for you, and the other person's on board with that. Then I think that's a good thing, and that's one of those little journeys within a day or within an hour,
Yeah.
and everything leads to a good outcome.
Metaphors always help as well
Yeah.
when things are too
Probably read
complex.
too many philosophical books and things in the recent years
Yeah.
as well. But
Yeah.
yeah.
It's interesting what you said about having people around you to just listen and not necessarily do anything, because my assumption, which is changing now, especially about men, is that need to always have a solution and to problem solve. Whether that's a fair assumption or not, I don't know. But does it sometimes feel difficult to just sort of sit with whatever is going on and not always, yeah, try and kind of solve everything?
Yeah, I think it's a natural human trait, really, isn't it? Is to try and provide advice or a solution to what someone's going through. Um, but I like the idea of, rather than, I guess for context as well, about a year ago I did some like peer support mental health training, and it was for a local charity who wanted people that had a history of mental health, like history like mine, that
Mm.
you can be there with people who are struggling in that moment and feel like that they have someone who can really relate to what they're going through. And that's obviously in addition to like what you do as a therapist. It's just a different way of looking at it.
Mm.
And the training that I had with that was, the number one rule was don't give advice, which it sounds strange, but it's not really. The nuance behind that is it's give advice, but empower the person in the way that you give advice. So it
Mm.
would be, for example, have you thought about doing this? Or which is effectively you giving advice of what that thing, but
Yeah.
they're owning it, and they're owning,
Mm.
and that means that allows them to then get out of, or allow them to start getting out of the position they're in to want to be getting support from a mental health charity anyway. And that's
Yeah.
really stuck with me. And if anyone ever opens up to me about anything, I always remember that, and I always remember trying and empower that person. And a year later, I've definitely seen that have a really positive effect on the people that you've, in a way, given advice to, but not really.
Yeah.
They feel like they've done it themselves because you've offered them that opportunity. And I think that's a really powerful way of phrasing a conversation as well,
Yeah. That's so
because
true.
you're allowing them to talk,
Yeah.
rather than you giving them a minute monologue of what your advice is. You're asking them a simple question around the advice you want to give, but then they own what they say. And I think that's really
Mm.
interesting.
Like you said, it can also be very disempowering if someone is just giving you advice. Um, and the idea that if you ask questions in a way to like guide them, you're sort of leading them to so that they come up with their own conclusions, and they probably remember that feeling a lot better as well, even if they don't remember exactly what the solution or what the outcome was. It's the feeling that you get from doing that rather than like just being told what to do. Like, yeah, you should exercise more, or you should go out for a walk and stop drinking, all that kind of thing.
It's, I guess, empowerment when it comes to mental health as a topic is a really interesting point. Um, through my own experience, I've had people throughout the journey that, of course, been there to support, but
Mm.
I definitely do feel that it was ultimately myself that allowed me to get through those experiences. And if you feel empowered in the moment to be able to do that, I think that this is probably quite a big statement, but I think that is the root cause of how people become, how people feel better and feel more optimistic about life, is when they feel like strength within themselves.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm very much a big advocate of trying to empower everyone when it comes to the topic of their own mental health.
Psychosis is something that a lot of people don't understand unless they've experienced it themselves. Even if you
Hmm.
know someone who's gone through an episode, it's still quite kind of impossible to relate. And I think the reason why I wanted to ask you about it is because I do know people who have been affected by it, and it's hard to know how to support, how to identify from like being a support network and also healthcare professionals too. And it can lead to substance misuse and ultimately death and suicide as well. So I think it's really important to talk about it more and like kind of understand what it is
Mm.
and address those misconceptions and maybe assumptions that people have about it.
My own experience of it, I would say, is quite unique because I think I went into psychosis, or it was triggered, and this is quite an unusual thing to hear, but I think it was because I was too happy.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean by that was, as the context of how it happened, I was living in London at the time and was, I guess, living quite a busy lifestyle. I was working long hours. I was going out socially multiple times a week. It's like having a lot of fun. But what that meant was, without me realizing, there was the lack of sleep. There was probably not looking after my body in terms of drinking too much alcohol and things. And I don't mean that the psychosis started from alcohol particularly, but it was just more I didn't look after myself. So then what happens is from what I now know from the people around me, there's a lot of erratic behaviors that come with that. So it'll be going for walks in the middle of the night or speaking about things in a way that is a little bit kooky, if is a good way to put that. And all of that really then leads to a point where I would say I started to sort of lose control of what you would now say is reality, to some
Mm-hmm.
extent. So you end up, I remember experiencing things um, like hallucinations really, and being able to seeing things that aren't there and creating scenarios in my head and feeling like I had these abilities to do things that I didn't. I know now, having research that's called like a God complex, and it's I've gone through this, but this still sounds so strange to me.
Mm.
Like that's the reality of it, is that I don't really feel like I was going through that at the time. It's only in hindsight when I think about it and I speak to people and go and they say what happened. I went, oh, that is really weird, isn't it? That's crazy.
And have
But
you
what
told a lot of people about this as well?
oh like it not openly to the point where I just randomly blurt it out, but I think if it has context in around the topic of extreme mental health, I think it's really important for me to talk about it, because I think without knowing that, like, you would never expect that I would have been through that. I think I'd say I fit into society very comfortably now, and back then, I was at the point where I went through that psychosis, and as mentioned at the beginning, I was admitted into a psychiatric ward, and all this stuff was so like alien, truthfully, in like my world. I didn't have any friends that had been through this. Like my
Mm.
parents hadn't been through this. I didn't have family members that had gone through it. So it was all very unusual for the world that I'm in. Um, but I think going back to your sort of original question at the beginning, um, the way that like psychosis can happen to anyone, it doesn't have to be because you're taking too many substances, or your lifestyle is at a point where it's making you do erratic things, or there isn't necessarily a trigger. It's only understandable in hindsight, in a way. And if you are sort of noticing that anyone is going through these kind of erratic psychotic style episodes like I've described, and I think it's really important to speak to them about it to their face as
Mm-hmm.
well. Because looking back, no one ever said to me like, "Are you okay? Like, you're
Mm.
doing this really odd thing." I think I now know that people spoke about it sort of not behind my back in a negative way. They were just concerned about me. So I had maybe not as much self-awareness of it happening at the time, and it's only in hindsight that people are very open about talking to me about it. Now I'm
Mm.
okay with it, but in the moment I think it was a scary thing for other people speak to me about because they probably didn't really understand it themselves.
Yeah. And it does sound hard to grasp, doesn't it? Like, kind of speaking objectively about it now. When you talk about it, and I know you said you've spoken a lot about it when it's kind of relevant and important, what is it like talking about it now and kind of looking back on that?
Well, I think I can speak about it from an inspirational perspective. I've spoken about I've spoken about it at a couple of presentations I've done at business events. So that's how open I am about it because, I'm willing to talk about it to a point where like that could put off people even working with me because maybe some people would struggle with the idea of someone being open about that. I don't know. That might not be true. And I've ended up did a particular talk for in a room of 30 people, and I literally made about three or four people in the room like cry.
Mm.
And that was just me. I just wanted to give some context to like how I've got to where I am now. Um, and yeah, I had so many nice messages and so many people saying like that was such an inspiring story, which is quite overwhelming because that's just my life and I'm just talking about it. But maybe that also shows that it's not as commonly talked about.
Yeah, exactly. You
Um,
didn't have to talk about it.
nowadays anyway. I didn't have to talk about it, but because someone was up there talking about it, it's yeah, it's triggered those emotions.
Mm.
And it seemed like this massive, uphill battle and journey, which it was at times. But for me, it was so long ago now that it's just something that I use to inspire other people and myself, I guess, moving
Yeah,
forward.
definitely. And I wish more people did speak about it. I wish more people were more educated and informed about it. It's not kind of forced in your face in the news and the media whenever they talk about mental health. So, but I do think it's not been, it's kind of misunderstood with other conditions.
There's a really good BBC documentary with an actor, and I
Oh, is
can't
it
remember his name.
David Harewood, actually?
Yeah, that's it.
That's a
Yeah,
good one.
yeah. So it's called Psychosis and Me, I
Mhm.
think.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's like there's similarities in what he went through and what I went through. So yeah, if anyone wants to learn more, that's a really good documentary. In him, I guess the similarities in that he had that in his early to mid 20s, I think, and then now became a successful actor. In that, like his life moved on, and he
Mm.
spent maybe many years not really addressing or discussing it, but it was always part of who he was. But I think that's probably the best thing I've seen in the media
Mm.
in terms of a TV program. But in terms of the general news, I don't think you really see it at all. It's a bit of a hidden topic.
Yeah. You mentioned burnout as well, essentially, and it there being kind of an insidious feeling of not sleeping, being really happy, like making the most of London life as a young 20-year-old. I guess what's your relationship to burnout now?
Yeah, I think I'm confident in saying that I would never hit a point of burnout again because of the control that I feel like I have with my life. And I've been like self-employed now for 2.5 years, and one of the reasons for being self-employed wasn't necessarily to be a millionaire, although that might be nice. It was it was to have freedom. It was all about freedom, and freedom is either to live your day or live your day as you want, or travel the world or whatever it was. But I actually think looking back, um, that probably has been influenced by my mental health journey and knowing that I wanted to be able to have control of my day every day and be able to stop work when I wanted, or to be able to walk outside, or those things I mentioned earlier.
Mm.
So my relationship with burnout now is really good, and I also have a really good self-awareness if I am feeling tired, or I realize actually I have done a bit too much,
Mm.
looking at a screen and being in the depths of emails or websites or whatever it may be. So um, I I have in recent years cancelled plans last minute, and just said I'm just feeling exhausted, and just been really honest with whoever it was I was going to meet. My caveat to that is I cancel plans, and always if I ever do that, I always rearrange it in that
Yeah.
moment and say, can we do this day next week? Because I never want to cancel plans and then not rearrange it because I don't think that's the best thing to do socially.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just really making sure that you prioritize your own time and energy and to avoid burnout. And that definitely did stem from, yeah, 10 years ago in London for sure.
Mm,
COVID changed a lot of things.
mm,
I think burnout would have become a lot more prevalent. I think it's actually reduced a little bit now because even it doesn't really matter if you work for yourself or work for a company or the public sector or whatever. You've got a lot of the time a lot more control over, working from home and flexible days and the talks of 4-day weeks, and people seem to be able to do career breaks much easier now, and there's a lot more um, advantages, I guess, in the
mhm.
working world than there would have been even 5 years ago, and there's a lot more flexibility. So like I think yeah the I think you're a lot more empowered now than you would have been 4 or 5 years ago, with just the ability of being able to have these breaks and to allow burnout not to happen. There's definitely a shift in there's a societal shift in what we would have typically have done, say 20, 30 years ago. It was get a job, buy a house, get married, have kids, and that was like the status quo. That was the norm. Whereas now, I'm in my early 30s and I have a few friends that have quit their corporate jobs or gone, I'm just taking a 6 month career break and traveling the world and doing these things. Um, and it's all to fulfill like a need or a want that they have, I guess, deep down to say see the world, for example, or to not feel like they um, are like stuck in a job that they feel like they're missing out.
Mm,
Um, and that's particularly like I noticed that in men now more than we would have done because I think traditionally men they just work their whole lives and
mm.
that whole traditional thing is look after the family and everything. Maybe that's also a whole wider topic that we won't get into because it's a bit of a rabbit hole of like women being more career driven or
Mm,
having families later. And
yeah,
um, I think it's really cool, the generation we're in and the way that people look at life and promote um, their want and like act on the needs they have to see things, whether that's travel the world or we like ultimately promote their sort of happiness and their own mental health. And like I think that's a little bit alien to a lot of people who are maybe in the 50s and 60s now, but that's like become
yeah.
the new norm, I think.
That's what I quite like though about talking about health, mental health, is that there's so many thoughts that like come through my mind whenever I'm speaking about it, and so many different rabbit holes you can go into, because it is just like everything feeds into it, doesn't it? Really, like us as individuals, but also wider societal influences too. But
Sure.
anyway, men's mental health.
I do think that it's important that men's mental health and is still a priority, and that men feel empowered, to use that word again, to be able to talk about it and be open about it. Um, there's a lot of men who I know obviously are not as open as I am, and I know
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the smaller category of talking about these things. Um, but just like not make like I don't think it would be helpful to be in a world where like certain messages are, it's you can't men can't talk about their negative thoughts or how they're feeling, because I don't think that's helpful for anything. And I'm not bringing different like genders into this or anything. I sort of have a view of like I'm a advocate of everyone's mental health,
Mm-hmm.
whoever you are. Um, so men's empowerment over if they're having a bad day, it's okay to still moan and complain about it, and just like like women or other genders. I mean, I recently, just this weekend, actually attended a men's empowerment coffee afternoon thing, actually, which is
That's
called
cool.
Grounded Conversations, and it was just for
Ah,
men.
Like how you
We
grind a
made
coffee. That's cool.
So the timing of that and having this conversation is actually quite cool because that's the first thing I've seen in the city that I live in that's like that.
Mm,
And that focus is no agenda. Um, there's no ultimate conversation type or flow to that. It's
mm,
just chat and like how's your week been and how's I think the guy who runs it is trying to run that every month for now. But I think that's a really cool, unique thing that you don't see as much. I know there's the big talks in the like Andy's Man Club. I think I'm
hmm.
aware of and a few others, but having they can be quite daunting. I think for some people to go to. So just having a little one that you know is in your
Yeah.
local city, I think these are really good initiatives, just so that men feel like they've got a safe space to talk to other men. I think that's something that I'd love to see more. Um,
Yeah, I love
just
that.
because I don't want men's voices to not to be disempowered if that's the word.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that word. Keep using that word. Yeah, I think it was like last year. I went to this conference on men's mental health at Chelsea Football Club, and there was a charity who run football sessions. I can't remember what exactly it was called. It was local to Hammersmith though. They run football sessions and they have a chat afterwards, like about. But they do have certain topics, but quite general topics like stress or low mood and things like that. They said it's really interesting because the people who just wanted to play football and didn't initially were like kind of skeptical about talking openly were the ones who benefited the most and actually ended up enjoying and looking forward to those chats the most. And again, the people who wanted to come and just talk and weren't really interested in the football side then ended up loving football. So I think it's really nice because it you sort of just don't know what to expect. I mean, obviously I'm not a man, but from hearing their experience, I was like, that's really cool that actually you can again, it's like pairing mental and physical health together, and then also changing people's expectations about what they might find enjoyable.
Yeah, definitely. That's it's great. I actually have a couple of friends in Edinburgh who've just started a business, and it's exactly what you're referring to, which is a
Mm.
mixture of the physical and then the I guess talking and emotional side of things. And it's made for corporate retreat days basically, but you have half the day, which is you go and spend time on an assault course and get your endorphins going and enjoy that. And then the other half of the day is with a psychologist who's the other half of the business. And then they just chat through, that side of things. So you've got
Mm.
the physical and non-physical chats
Yeah,
that go alongside. And I think that's such an interesting concept. And there may be a few people, like you say, who could be daunted by either one of those. But ultimately, it's such a great team building idea. I think
yeah,
that's maybe a bit of the future of how we do things from a team building or whatever realm that is.
exactly. And kind of peppering it in everyday life and making it a lot less daunting, especially paired with like some kind of activity. Do you notice a difference then speaking with your male friends compared to your female friends about like getting them to open up about how they're feeling?
Yeah, I think one thing I will say is that I feel very lucky to have male friends that are they will talk about a lot of things without being prompted. That maybe that's just because they know that I'm happy to talk about things and I'm an open book to that extent. So I I have friends that if they're feeling a certain way, then they'll just tell me about it, and I really appreciate that. Um, there are some that there'll be a bit of a say an angry moment or a tipping point, and then it'll go, oh, okay, they're not feeling themselves, but there
Mm.
was no real way to know until they hit that point, and then that's when they say, I'm feeling crap at the moment, or I've had a really bad week. Um, so that it's just treating them with kindness in that moment is something that um, I try and do. I've made mistakes and got a bit angry with their reactions in the past, and that's like a learning journey for me. But then after the heat of the moment is just checking in the next day or the next week and seeing how they're doing.
Mm.
And that's just really important um, for them to know that they have someone who is looking out for them. Um, and yeah, trying to just make sure that they're not alone in whatever they're going through in that moment in
Mm,
time. Um, so yeah, I mean that's what I try and do with my friends to help them. Um, but yeah, as I say, I'm quite lucky in that a lot of my friends are very open in asking. Sometimes they do ask me for opinions, and I try. I might give an opinion or some advice if they're asking, but a lot of the
mm,
time they will just want to offload and unload, as we spoke about,
yeah.
and then I just become a bit of a listener, and then maybe ask one of those leading "Have you thought?" questions, which I
Yeah.
think I
What do
just
you
think they're
think?
great. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to also ask you if there's anything that you'd like to ask any other men that come on here.
um, yeah, I think the question that comes to mind is what are the barriers that they feel that they're facing to not want to open up or talk about how they're feeling?
Hmm.
Because I think there are a lot of men that maybe suffer in silence and have this something deep within them that makes them just avoid talking about it. That could be personal experiences or trauma in their lives. I completely understand, but to maybe have a think of or ask yourself what's stopping me being
Mm,
talking about how I'm feeling, because as someone who has learned to do that more and more in my life at the moment, I think it's only had good outcomes. It
mm,
really there's really nothing bad that I can think of that's come from me just being more open. So I
yeah.
think you'll only feel better for doing that.
Yeah. Thank you. That's kind of my main thought when I'm talking to anyone is like what are the barriers and to opening up and is it just the idea of the assumption and misconception of men just not talking as much as women, or are there other things going on that we're missing? Because I'm sure there are. I'm sure there's like lots of complex things depending on person to person, culture, etc. So I'll definitely be asking that as well. Um, yeah, and finally, do you like strawberry milkshakes? Because that's the name of this weirdly titled project.
Yeah, I actually don't drink milkshakes at all.
Oh.
That's the honest answer. But I would
Did you
say
used
that if
to?
yeah, like thinking of maybe McDonald's back in the day, when we were kids, I'd probably go strawberry after a good vanilla or banana first. So maybe in my top three, I will say
So that's a no,
that.
basically.
I do like it, but I think I have other preferences. Yeah,
Okay, bananas a strange one.
a rogue
Do
one.
they? Do
Yeah,
McDonald's do that?
I don't know actually. I can't. But this is why I don't drink milkshakes, so it's quite
Yeah,
hard for me to remember where I've drunk those milkshakes.
yeah. The title's landing well. But yeah, thank you so much for coming. I mean, did you want to talk about anything else? Is there anything else that's I didn't ask or that's kind of been on your mind?
I don't think so. No, I think we covered so many topics in the chat. Um, so no, I'd love to be able to give you some sort of additional element, but yeah, I guess my takeout thought would just be always try and focus on doing things that makes you happy, and that doesn't always mean the grand goals that go over a year or 5 years or anything like that. I mean, like what's going to make you happy today or this week? Because I don't really think too far ahead. I just think what's going to make me feel happy in this short time period. So it's
Mm,
not necessarily a question or a topic to talk about, but I think that's becoming more and more important to me. It's just short term happiness mindset seems to make things a lot easier and less overwhelming.
mm. And it sounds like more grateful as well for the smaller things in life that really make a difference.
Yeah, I guess it feeds into the gratitude side of things as well. So feeling grateful for where you are and how you got to that point, and that could be through your own development, or you got lucky, or it doesn't really
Mm,
matter what it came
yeah,
from, but you can all be grateful for, whatever it is. Could be meeting someone that's been a great addition to your life, or anything.
yeah.
Yeah,
So thank you so much again.
no problem. Thank you for having me on.